Hey everyone, Steve Irola here with our Drawing Zombies Part 2. So, in the first part, we drew this very handsome looking fellow. I do have another couple zombies that I've done that I'll go ahead and show on the screen now just for a couple minutes. So you can just kind of see some of the sped up process, but I do want to walk through kind of some of the steps and what I'm kind of thinking as I do my initial, adding my pencil strokes in, etc., and kind of how I handled making it look like this traditional medium of graphite or charcoal. I welcome you to draw along with me or just kind of hang out and have it play in. If you're coming along for the ride, of course, I want to know what you'd like to see, and we can have some fun. So with that being said, I'm going to just go to the brushes that I've been using in my prior one that you saw in part 1 of the zombies, and that is the general brush, part of Lean's charcoal master pack, and I'll leave a description in the comments below. I'll show you one of the other ones that I use a lot. It's kind of similar, and that's the Derwent. Yeah, so the Derwent under sketching, that comes default with Procreate. So I'm going to pull a color here, kind of stay a warm color, not too dark, but I want to make sure that you guys can see it too. A little bit of color to it. We have that. Let's make sure we're on a new layer. So, generally starting, it's going to be so loose and rough. You really need to get something down on the paper so you can determine if it is, too big, too far to the left, too small, etc. So the first thing I like to do is if I know this is going to be a standing zombie, and I might even draw them here, but if I'm going to draw a few zombies on this page, I'm probably going to be moving things around. So I'm not too worried about composition right now, but I do want to make sure that my drawing doesn't go off the side of the paper or something like that. Nice part is it's very easy to move digitally. Obviously, working traditionally, that's not an option. So again, right now I'm just trying to get the general kind of position of how is this zombie standing. I'm just kind of loosely putting something down just to get it started, and then we'll start nitpicking and chopping away at it. So like I said, getting those marks down, you got to get them down first to say, is the head too wide, is it too narrow? But unless you have a point of comparison, you can't say if something's too wide or too narrow. And you can also see at this stage, I mean, my lines are really loose. They're super sketchy if you look. One, that kind of lends to helping me feel around. It also gives us a chance for some things to happen in here. It would be equivalent of like paint on a brush that's just kind of, oh, look, that looks like a wrinkle here or something like that you can kind of go along with. So you can kind of just be very, very loose at this stage. Sometimes I like to just use the eraser tool here like I would in, an actual drawing, because I think it helps kind of lend to that look. You can still see there's little lines here still that aren't going to go away, and that's going to help lead to that feel of being traditional. And that's primarily because that's exactly what would happen in traditional. The lines would maintain some of their visibility because of the eraser. So, and I do want to widen this guy. His torso's a little too narrow. So again, this is an instance, instead of me just redrawing this side, because I like the shapes that I've drawn here, and I don't necessarily want to draw those again, so let's take advantage of digital here. And I'm literally just going to kind of take this side of his body by using the freehand selection tool. I'm going to go to move, I'm going to be on uniform, and I'm just going to kind of slide this over a little bit to widen his stance, or widen his body up a little bit. And then I can come in here and start filling in again the pieces that I moved. So at this point, I'm not really shading too much. You'll see sometimes I'll scribble in because there are dark values, maybe where there's heavy shadow hitting it or under, like, under the head here. And I'm not necessarily going into a full shading or value, but I'm just really trying to help suggest where those are at a very kind of simple level. So I feel this whole shoulder's a little high. So I'm going to just, again, this is where I'm going to take an opportunity to just adjust it. This time I might try like a little bit of warping and just kind of pull it around to where I want it. Just want to get these shoulders a little bit more even. So just continuing to refine a bit. It probably looks pretty messy while observing now, and it's because it is. we're going to come back through this here shortly and actually redraw everything. But a lot of these marks that I make will remain in the final image as well, which kind of adds to that, again, that traditional look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. I'm going to change this layer, lighten its opacity to probably about 50%. So I still want to be able to see it, and I want to make sure you guys can see it, which looks like you can. I'm going to create a layer on top of it, and then I'm going to begin to draw on this layer. All right, so I'm going to start putting some of the details into the zombie now that I have kind of this blueprint down to give me some guidelines. I have a rough idea of where his head's going to be, the body parts and all that, and I'm literally just going to redraw everything, but using those established guidelines. I have a tendency to draw heads like what seems to be too small a lot. I just enlarge that. That's going to be a little bit. And here I'm starting to think about how his jacket's kind of torn up, his clothes are torn. So in here you can see I'm just trying to suggest a little bit of the folds here and trying to really show that this jacket's kind of going around the side a little bit, and we're seeing the front also. So this is fine for the next level. I'm going to kick this one down a little bit as well. And then usually I go to my first layer, and that one will move that to about half of it. 7/8, that's fine. All right, so I'm going to add one more in. And now this is really going to be kind of more my refined layer. And I might even come in here for a second, put a new kind of layer down here. While I'm not going to a full, value shade of what I did there, I do like to come in here, and I've actually been playing around with this fresco brush a little bit, and that's under painting. So painting fresco. And just so same color, and I'm just going to kind of darken some of the values of where I know, like I want his hair darker, his eyes are going to be darker in here. So I'm just kind of hitting those areas a little bit, and then we'll cross hatch on top of them. But this will help us just kind of darken those areas a lot faster. So I'm going to go back to the top layer now, go back to my general. I'm going to go ahead and up that opacity now so we can make a little bit stronger of marks. I am far from an anatomy expert, but that's something that as an artist, as we continue to learn, I mean, there's just really no substitute for knowing what's going on, like where do these bones go. I do have a skull off to the side, which is helping as well, and why I like to keep it that way as well to be able to reference. It definitely comes in very, very handy. So now on this kind of more detailed layer, I'm definitely starting to use some cross hatching and putting some tone down to kind of get those dark spots in. I do want to allow some of these pencil strokes to show through, but it wouldn't be uncommon for me to grab this smudge tool and then just kind of help smear those darks a little bit to cover a little bit more area without me having to cross hatch them all. And then I'll usually come back in and then tighten up any lines or of definition that I wanted to retain in there. So as I stated before, I'll often build up some of the tone, just using some cross hatching here just to darken areas and suggest. It also helps loosen the drawing up a little bit from the areas that I was a little stiff on when I was trying to measure out. And so this is the part that you kind of get to have a little bit of fun with it and just kind of figure out how do you want to make it just kind of read as far as the pencil strokes are concerned. And like I said, you can kind of use those scribbles and cross-hatching to actually bring in areas of interest kind of into focus or bring things, just kind of make them a little bit messier. All right, so that's a quick sketch of our first one. I'm just going to group those layers by selecting them all again, hitting group. We'll just call this guy Zombie 1. And for now, I'm just going to hide it so we can just kind of draw on the same spot, and I'll figure out, where we'll put them. So maybe what we'll do is like maybe we'll put this guy in the middle. And then we can start arranging these And then I'm going to actually just hide these for our next one. So once again, we're going to start with a very, very basic kind of rough outline sketch just to hit the main areas of the body, looking for proportions. How is the head size in comparison to the broadness of the shoulders? Trying to get a little bit of that hunched over feel as he's running towards us. You know, where are the knees in relationship to each other? And again, think of this first pass as kind of like construction lines that you're laying down. I usually digitally go a little bit further with the construction lines than I might on a piece of paper before I kind of start my second pass, just because that information can be used and preserved on digital or moved around at early stages to where you'd have to, you know, redraw a considerable amount of things if you're doing it traditionally. So you can see I've lowered the layer opacity again, and I'm now starting to draw on a layer on top of that. And this layer will be at full opacity, and the layer below it usually is at about half. And so you can see here, I'm just going back over the lines created previously, but adding a little bit more detail now to them, and because I can kind of invest a little bit more time into them now that I'm understanding, you know, I'm not going to be redrawing much at this point. And again, the benefits of digital, even if I can select information on more than one layer. You know, I can take along the first and second pass simultaneously if we need to move something. And then that is just an iterative process. And, you know, the number of passes that you do just really depends on how quickly you can get to the final result that you're looking for. You know, taking into consideration that you do, in essence, redraw it every time you start a new layer. And it's very common for me to usually land somewhere around 2 or 3, typically 3. But I like that because I go back and I, you know, lessen up the opacity of the other layers more and more, which it makes it look like very light drawings that you'll see and you would see on paper. So again, doing it this way digitally kind of makes it look like it was done on paper, because that is what you would have to contend with anyhow. So going in here and just kind of shading in, I do have, again, that fresco brush, just like we did previously, to help us with our values and show, you know, hint at some of the lighting or what's close to us or away from us, and that can just suggest a lot of, you know, detail that's not there. And oftentimes then I'll go in like we did in the last one and just throw in some sketches on top of it, either cross-hatching or just following the contour of the area, depending what it's doing. And again, staying very loose, because this top level now is really just about the, you know, let's make it look loose and very sketch-like. So that'll complete this guy, and we will put him into the mix and head on to the next drawing. This next zombie we'll do with a more of a torso shot. So we'll do this one also running, as if he's running towards us, because it's kind of what zombies do if you're a tasty human. So again, this is that layer 1 where we're just really trying to block in our proportions and where all the features of the face and the body. But you'll notice here too, I mean, I've kind of sped this along so it doesn't take too long, but I really started to concentrate more on the features of the face once the body was laid out. And again, really think about working those larger shapes first, and then begin to go smaller and smaller into more detail. It's just easier. You're able to keep your eye on the bigger picture. And again, with digital, it's fantastic because you can always go in there and change some large items or some large parts of the drawing without having to erase, which is really nice. But I just feel it's a good habit to, at least even to keep my own workflow similar to when I draw on paper versus when I draw on or digitally. So, but like you're seeing here, I'm moving the head around, and there's no sense if you spot a mistake. And I don't even like calling it a mistake because it's really just got to put it down until you figure out where you want it to be. But when you find something that you want to change, digitally, you can move it. I mean, it doesn't make sense to, erase it and then redraw it unless you feel you're going to get something more out of it that way. But otherwise, I would opt for the speed. So once again, first pass is done. So I am making the layer about 50% transparent, creating a new layer on top of that, and now I'm going to start going through again and picking out those details and being less sketchy with the lines and kind of making more decisions on, exactly where the darker line is going to fall to represent, whatever feature it is that I'm working on. If I'm not doing a lot of value shading a lot of time, I may go a little bit darker on the color of the pencil or brush that I'm using. But sometimes I'll just continue to paint because I'm lightening the layers underneath it, so I can continue to draw with the same color, so the same value and color. And then I might do a final pass, or a darker pass where I can actually change the value of the brush and pull the darks a little bit more. But this one's pretty consistent. And just did some minor shading again with the fresco brush. And again, just putting those little details on top. This one's very quick, but again, even with a quick sketch like this, you can get enough detail to kind of see what's going on. And if we're going to take it to a fully shaded drawing, like we did the very first zombie head. So this will kind of wrap it up for this guy. So I will hide him so we can figure out where we want to place him here, and we can move on to the next zombie. And here we are on our final zombie. We're going to do this one as a female zombie. And again, we'll probably go a little bit closer up. We won't do a full body shot. Just like before, I'm just doing some feeling around on the first layer, trying to determine the tilt of the head, where the eyes are going to be, the nose, and just again trying to get general proportions. And we're going to change these a lot as we go through. Even on this layer, this construction layer, I'll move things around or erase things a lot. And then getting down into the torso area. It's always good to start to work on some of your torso as well when you're trying to gauge the proportions of the head, because I found a lot of times, the head looks correct and it technically is in proportion to itself or in relationship to itself, but putting the torso out really kind of helps you figure out if you're at the right size or not. So it's always good to start getting something rough in there. I actually went a little bit further on the head than I usually do before tackling the torso on this one. And now you can see we're going to go ahead and make the layer about 50% transparent, create a new layer just like before, and now we're drawing on top of that. Again, using that underlayer as my scaffolding to determine where do I want these features to be. And here you can also see I am taking the brush or the pencil and I'm scribbling a little bit to get some tone down for some of the shadowed or recessed areas. And it just varies when I do this, but sometimes it's easier doing it along with it, especially if I'm going to be using the shadows as a measuring tool. How thick does this shadow look, or how far does it come down, and does that look correct? So you can use the shadows to help you get some of your proportions as well, especially if it's in like dramatic lighting. I might leave them dark with just the scratches, back and forth sketching on top of it, or I might get the smudge tool and then just kind of brush it out a little bit and soften it down so it looks a little bit softer. And then I might repeat that process and come back over that and then put some more lines on top of it. So just pulling out more details now on this layer, the hair, indicating where the hair is falling down, where the ear is, how the hair gets pulled back. And I'm really thinking of the volume now and of the form. So I'm trying to, use your pencil marks to indicate, when the surface is curving around, you really want to show that with the lines not being straight, and really think about it going around the form that you're drawing. So whether it's the hair or the eyes or, the chin. So here I'm going to go again and create a layer underneath the ones that I've been drawing on with the fresco brush and just bring some tone in. So here I want to really have the hair stand out, so I am putting, or that it's a different tone. So I'm kind of putting it in there just to differentiate the dark and the light here. And still considering where my light source is coming from, which in this instance is the upper right as we're looking at it. So you'll notice some areas in the tone as I'm laying it down. I'm just kind of trying to be a little bit conscious of that, of, even though this hair might be dark black or dark brown hair, that light is still going to create a highlight up there, and we want to show that. It's very subtle, but it just makes it look a little bit more volumetric instead of two-dimensional. And now I'm just back on the another layer. I've created another detail layer, and you can see I've knocked back the most top level layer and made it a little bit less opaque. And now I'm going in with a darker tone on a new layer, so the brush color is a darker color, and this is at a fuller opacity since we reduced the one of the other one. And so you can see it's a very stark difference now between kind of the slight brown slash reddish color that we've been using. So this will really push those dark areas down. And for this last one that we're working on, I am going to put just a little bit of white, as I did before, where I'll just use that on kind of the larger volume areas of form, so you can kind of see where the light is coming from on the upper right. And then in some of the smaller details. And again, I'm not going to take this one to a full render, but just putting in enough to indicate where these highlights are, it could just really kind of flesh out the look of the drawing. You'll see I use cross-hatching in some of the areas here, and especially when I'm going this stark of a contrast to the pencils layers that were below it, I'm a little bit more mindful of the direction of the lines, and it's not so much just darkening that area now. I'm thinking of style and how does it look? What are people seeing when they look at it now? So I'm trying to make those lines apparent and a little bit more meaningful, to where on the lower layers you're really just trying to kind of darken the area a little bit. It adds texture and detail, which is nice, but the direction of the lines is, at that point is not as important as it becomes on these top layers, which will now be our more presentation layers, and our previous layers will begin to recede into the back. So just hitting these highlights in various areas, and you can really see how the highlights begin to pull those forms out. So again, hitting kind of those soft areas with the fresco brush, but this time in white. You can see like the top of the right shoulder there, the top of her chest, the top of her hair. It all gives a slight indication of where the light is coming from. And then using a white pencil, I can come back and kind of hit some of the little detailed areas in the hair, the eye, the nose. And I'm just making some slight adjustments as I'm coming in here. Doing a highlight layer really can start to change some of your proportions, or make you see some of the incorrectly drawn ones. So here I'm just selecting all the layers and using the liquefy tool to kind of shift all the layers around at once. And again, this is just one of the beautiful advantages of working digitally. If this was discovered this late in the drawing on a traditional piece, I'd pretty much have to start over, which wouldn't be fun. It just means I would take that much more care at the beginning phases, so I don't have to do this. But knowing that you have that safety net in digital, it does allow you to advance the drawing a little bit more than you might do traditionally, because you can do exactly that, come back and then just adjust the entire thing as if you were moving pieces of the paper around. So. And that'll about wrap this final zombie and the zombie tutorials part 2. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more of my drawing process and enjoyed checking out some of the zombies. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on a future video.